Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. These are feeds coming into the CBS News broadcast center from all of our affiliates and stations across the country. If it's happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here. Let's begin. Lawmakers return to the halls of Capitol Hill today with a busy agenda for the rest of the year, including electing a new Senate Majority Leader. And overnight, more names are added to President-elect Donald Trump's incoming administration and a short list for cabinet members, which prominent Republicans and loyal Trump supporters are filling out some key positions. Plus, 2 U.S. planes hit by gunfire as they fly over Haiti's capital city, as the country is continued to be plagued by gang violence and political unrest. This is CBS News 24/7. Hour in Washington, D.C., where Congress returns to work today. You're looking at live pictures of the Hill, where House Speaker Mike Johnson will brief reporters soon. We'll bring you his remarks as soon as they begin. But let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian to join us to talk about what's expected on the agenda going forward. So, Nicole, this press conference that Speaker Johnson is holding, what do we expect to hear from him?
Well, this is obviously the first time that we will hear directly from the Speaker and GOP leaders since the election here at the Capitol. And of course, even though the House hasn't officially been called, it leans Republican. But certainly from the posture of Mike Johnson and other GOP leaders, they're feeling very confident that they will be able to retain the majority. So we expect to hear their take on the election, what they feel went well in their view. Also worth noting that the Speaker has made clear over many months now that if Republicans were to get a trifecta, the White House, the House, and the Senate, that they would move swiftly to enact a 100-day agenda. So whether or not we will hear more from the Speaker on that front is something we'll be curious about. And then also, too, as we see the president-elect select some members of the House and also the Senate to serve in his administration, there's also that question of what are the potential implications, particularly if there's a slim majority in the House. So whether or not the Speaker addresses all of those remains to be seen, but those are certainly some of the questions that we have as he appears before us today.
Yeah, and as you know, Nicole, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries joined us on CBS Mornings earlier. We talked with him about the future of Democrats on the Hill. We'll play a little bit of what he had to say.
I think we're going to have a family conversation that needs to be clear-eyed, candid, and comprehensive to figure out what happened on election night, why did it happen, and how do we improve upon the performance in order to put us in the strongest possible position to deliver for the American people moving forward.
In a side conversation that I had with the Minority Leader, Nicole, I asked him if there were some lessons that he and the Democrats took away from the results of the election, including the fact that it was very, very hard for Americans to identify with they saw it difficult for Democrats to identify with the struggles that they were facing. It was one thing to hear about strong economic data, but the way people felt, they felt that their bills were higher. They felt that the price of groceries was higher. They felt that the price of gasoline was higher, and that the Democrats failed to deliver on that understanding of the American people if they were retooling that message. What are you hearing from the other leaders in the Democratic Party about how they plan to sort of realign themselves in this new paradigm?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think certainly we have heard that issue in terms of messaging among Democrats, whether or not it was effective. And that is certainly something that we have heard from many members suggest that perhaps there was a flaw in their messaging to the American people. But also, I would point out we did hear from the chair of the Progressive Caucus just yesterday, Pramila Jayapal, who did say that, in spite of the outcome of the election, she still feels confident in, the values of the Democratic Party, and that the role of Democrats in this new political environment she sees as serving as a check on the Trump administration, even if potentially Democrats remain in the minority. So again, I think Democrats know that they have some soul searching to do, but certainly many views on what the path forward should be.
Yeah, the other thing that Minority Leader Jeffries told me, Nicole, was that, and I asked him specifically if they were planning to repeat some of what they did in the wake of the first Trump administration, where it was resistance and going after the president with legal means. He didn't really give me too much insight into that, but I think the message now is we'll push back when it goes against our values. But if there is something, and I know you're waiting for the speaker to appear, but if there's something that we think we can work in a bipartisan fashion on, we're going to try to do that.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the hope, and I think you heard from Leader Jeffries in that interview with CBS Mornings say that certainly they want to help the American people, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents. We'll see what message Speaker Johnson shares as he heads down the stairs here at the Capitol.
Yeah, Nicole, thank you very much. I know you're going to get there so you can ask some questions. Folks, you're looking at a live picture right now of the Republican leadership, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, making their way to the podium there. Let's go ahead and listen.
Good morning. My name is Richard Hudson. I'm chairman of the NRCC, and I'm here to tell you it's morning again in America. On Election Day, Americans sent a clear message to reject the consequences of Democrat control. They said they couldn't afford the basics for their families' needs. They didn't feel safe in their communities. Their values were under attack. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris.
All right, folks. So you can see there the Republican leadership taking to that podium, including standing there to the right of, or to the left, but to the right of your screen, House Speaker Mike Johnson. When he begins speaking, we're going to bring you his remarks live, but let's pause for a moment. And here's why. We have some breaking news. There's a decision from a New York judge in President-elect Donald Trump's immunity case, and that decision means that the case has been delayed by a week. The president-elect was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in connection with payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Trump denied any wrongdoing. His lawyers are now arguing that the Supreme Court jury's ruling shields him from prosecution. CBS News political reporter, attorney Katrina Kaufman has been tracking the details, and she joins me now. Katrina, so explain what this decision means and whether or not the president's actions that he took in office were official acts. What is the judge considering?
Hi, Vlad. So what we've just learned is we were waiting for a decision from Judge Juan Merchan today on whether or not the verdict in this case should be thrown out on the basis of presidential immunity. What's now happened is this has been postponed by a week. The prosecution has asked for some time to weigh the balance of this jury verdict against the office of the president, the fact that Trump has now been re-elected president. So we have to wait a week to see what the judge is going to decide here. But essentially what he is determining is whether the Supreme Court's immunity ruling applies to this case in a way that the verdict should be thrown out completely. And the argument is that Trump says there was certain evidence that was allowed in that should be protected under that ruling. And he says that it's weighty enough that it would have changed the jury's verdict altogether. So Judge Merchan will ultimately have to decide, does the presidential immunity ruling apply enough that evidence was let in that shouldn't have been put before the jury? And if so, was it strong enough that it actually would have changed their ultimate decision? Or is it what's considered harmless error and the verdict would still stand? So we are going to be waiting another week for this now.
So what happens, Katrina, if the judge lets the verdict stand?
Vlad, well, that means that we would potentially have a sentencing. There is a current date for November 26th, although no matter what he decides, there are a lot of questions about whether that would be allowed to stand. There is a strong argument that as Trump is transitioning into power, it would put an undue burden of him to have a sentencing date. As always, we can also anticipate that Trump would appeal the verdict. So that would start by going to the First Department in New York and could ultimately go all the way to the Supreme Court.
All right, Katrina Kaufman for us, reporting on those important details as the New York judge has delayed that decision on President Trump's immunity case. Katrina, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vlad.
Okay, 2 U.S.-based flights have been hit by gunfire in Haiti. First, a Spirit Airlines flight was hit while trying to land in the capital of Port-au-Prince yesterday. Then, a bullet hole was found in a JetBlue aircraft which had just left the city. The flights were suspended at the country's international airport. Jacqueline Charles is the Miami Herald's Haiti and Caribbean correspondent, and she joins me now to discuss. Jacqueline, thank you so much. As always, your reporting is crucial on events like this. Can you describe one of the questions that a lot of people are sort of wondering today is, were those gangs deliberately trying to hit those aircraft, or was there something that was happening in and around the international airport there that caused those planes to be hit by gunfire? What are you learning?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we're waiting to hear from the Haitian authorities about, exactly what took place. We know that yesterday there was panic in the streets in Port-au-Prince because we were undergoing a transfer of leadership. They were installing a new prime minister after a couple of days of, shuffling back and forth and people saying that this move was illegal. And some of the gangs did make declarations of violence that was going to come. But I have to tell you, what happened yesterday is sort of like the worst nightmare, right? I mean, we saw what happened earlier this year where the airport was shut down for 3 months. I mean, the police and the army were deployed there. They destroyed a lot of houses. But there's always been this concern that the gangs would actually shoot at an aircraft. And last month, we had a UN helicopter. But yesterday, this was also major.
Yeah, indeed. The other crisis that Haiti is facing, of course, Jacqueline, is this constitutional crisis with regards to who actually is leading the country. As you know, there hasn't been an election since 2016. The Senate terms have expired. So where are we now? I mean, I know that Gary Coney is signing official documents as the Prime Minister of Haiti, but what is the situation as you understand it?
Well, we are actually today on our third prime minister in 10 months. I mean, Gary Coney was booted out of office over the weekend. Today, after saying that this was illegal, unconstitutional, and fighting it, he finally relented and he issued a tweet where he basically welcomed the new prime minister and wished him good luck in this mission. The new prime minister, Alexis Fizeme, he's a businessman educated in the United States. He previously ran unsuccessfully for the Haitian Senate. His father's a well-known activist who was involved in the disarmament in the early 2000s. But he's got his work cut out for him. We've got a little bit over 400 foreign troops in Haiti. But what we have seen in the last couple of months since June, since the first contingent started arriving, is a number of neighborhoods have fallen under gangs. Just last night, gangs moved into a community, Faux Parisien, which is not far from the border with the Dominican Republic. They set fire to an orphanage, and there are a number of Americans who are there who are running health centers, and they have basically been on edge for the last couple of months because after 2 years of resisting the gangs, the community next door fell in July, and now we're seeing that the gangs have finally made it into Faux Parisien, and there were dozens of heavily armed individuals, and they actually videotaped this to show what they were doing.
The other question that I have for you, Jacqueline, is in addition to the political turmoil that is unfolding in Haiti, the gang violence, is the issue of weapons. And I know you've done some incredible reporting over the last couple of years around this. Help people understand who are watching this broadcast right now how Haiti became awash in guns. Part of it has to do with the very lax laws that we have here in the United States and the ability of people to smuggle guns into Haiti from Florida, for example, and other places. But just describe how the country went from having few weapons 20 years ago to now being awash with the kind of weapons that you normally see on battlefields.
Well, exactly. Americans often ask, why should I care about this? And the reality is that the guns that are killing people in Haiti, and already this year, over 3,800 people have been killed, at least documented by gang violence. These guns are coming from the United States. I mean, not just in Haiti, but throughout the Caribbean, where we're seeing an explosion in homicides as a result of guns. In Florida, where I live, they're coming through the ports. The ports are not checking shipments that are going out unless they receive a tip. And so they arrive in Haiti, a country that is under a U.S. arms embargo. What that means is that the Haitian police, the Haitian government, does not have easily access to guns. They have to get permission from the U.S. government when they purchase guns. And often countries don't want to sell them guns because of this U.S. embargo. But yet at the same time, these gangs are acquiring guns enough to basically blow out the windows of an armored vehicle of the U.S. Embassy. Just a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. State Department, they confirmed that 2 of their armored vehicles assigned to the embassy were shot at, and one of them actually had the windows blown out. I received those pictures. So just imagine in terms of the caliber and the firepower that these gangs have, and the police, they have nowhere near this kind of firepower.
Jacqueline Charles, I urge everyone who's watching us here at CBS News to check out your reporting for the Miami Herald. You've been covering the Caribbean and Haiti specifically for almost 2 decades. Your reporting is crucial to our understanding of what's happening there. We appreciate your time with us. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring you now, as promised, to Speaker Mike Johnson with other House leaders addressing the results of last week's election. Let's listen in.
This moment, it is a beautiful morning in Washington. It is a new day in America. The sun's shining, and that's a reflection about how we all feel. This is a very, very important moment for the country, and we do not take it lightly. We did work really hard to bring this day about. The actual statistics are even harsher than you said, Richard. My team calculated, they told me last night, actually, when it was all said and done, it did more than 360 campaign events in over 250 cities across 40 states. And I logged enough miles to circumnavigate the globe 5.5 times. But it was worth it. It was worth it. And we got extraordinary candidates. We flipped blue seats to red as we planned, and we kept this majority. We expect that the majority will be larger than last time. We still have a number of races outstanding, but we're very optimistic about those. And we are looking forward to governing in unified government beginning in January. It's true that on Tuesday, voters rejected what they really felt was the misery of the last 4 years. We're moving on and we're turning the page, and this is something that the American people desperately need and deserve. We are going to raise an America First banner above this place. And you saw a demographic shift that I was talking about on the campaign trail for over a year, with new demographics, new groups of persons who had not traditionally been with the Republican Party, who came on board with us because they believed in what we were saying. They believed the answers that we were providing for all the great challenges facing the country. And we made them a commitment to do that. And we will. And as the new members return now, we lay the groundwork for the next Congress, and we usher in this new day in America. Republicans in the House and Senate have a mandate. It's true. It was a decisive win across the nation. The American people want us to implement and deliver that America First agenda. And we have to do that while we have that energy and that excitement beginning on the very first day of the Congress in the new year. It's clear the American people do want secure borders. They want to prevent terrorists and criminals from entering the country. These things are common sense. They want and deserve lower costs for groceries and gasoline. They want us to project strength on the world stage again and not the weakness that we have projected for the last 4 years. They want an end to the wokeness and the radical gender ideology and a return to common sense in our children's classrooms and corporate boardrooms and government agencies. And we're going to ensure all that's true. This leadership will hit the ground running to deliver President Trump's agenda in the 119th Congress, and we will work closely with him and his administration to turn this country around and unleash, as he says, a new golden age in America. That's not a campaign slogan. We believe that that is true. We believe in our hearts that America's best days are ahead of us, and we're excited to deliver upon that promise. The only way we're able to work quickly is because we have unified control of the Congress, both chambers now in the White House, beginning January. And I want to congratulate all our Republican incumbents who worked so hard to ensure their re-elections and our new members who helped us to keep this House majority, especially a couple of new members that flipped districts from red to blue, people like Tom Barrett and Ryan McKenzie, Rob Bresnahan, Tim Moore, Addison McDowell, Brad Knott, Gabe Evans, from different states around the country who worked really hard to ensure that we could have Republicans return to those seats. And we have an amazing group of freshman members who are going to join our conference, the Patriots who are already here and who are ready to implement this agenda on day one. Now, as we sit here this morning, we're still watching a number of races. We have races still pending in Alaska, Arizona, California, Maine, Ohio, and Oregon. And we're going to ensure that every single legal vote is counted in those races. So while we're completing the work of this Congress, we're shifting gears.
All right, folks, you're listening to House Speaker Mike Johnson. Not a lot of policy agenda issues being raised here. More of a victory lap, given the result of last week's election, presidential election, and the potential because not all the races have been called for the House to remain in Republican hands for the next term. We're going to continue to monitor what the speaker is saying there. If he talks about some specific policy items that will affect you, the people, we'll bring it to you live. Meanwhile, let's continue with reporting out on both U.S. coasts with regards to wildfires and more dangerous conditions on the radar across the Northeast. Details coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Happening now, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, just announced that he is resigning. This comes after a report concluded the Church of England covered up a sex abuse case. Our partners at the BBC are following the latest developments. Let's listen into their reporting.
Permission from His Majesty the King, and the process is that the Archbishop of Canterbury can't just resign or choose to retire. He has to write to the King and CC in the Prime Minister and ask permission from the monarch in order to resign. And Justin Welby saying that permission has been granted. He has decided to resign. He said that he has been clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatizing period between when he was told of the abuse that John Smythe committed. John Smythe, a former barrister who ran Christian camps in the UK in the 1970s and 80s that Justin Welby himself attended as a young man. Justin Welby says he was told of Smythe's abuse that was meted out on dozens of young boys, teenagers in the UK in the 1970s and 80s, and then many more in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Justin Welby was told of that abuse, he said, in 2013, but the abuse continued right up until Smythe's death in 2018, before Smythe could face justice. And he said that the exact timings of his resignation and his departure will be decided. But he says he hopes, I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitment to creating a safer church. And he says, as I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors.
All right, you've been listening to the BBC coverage, the news out of the United Kingdom. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has resigned over his handling of a sex abuse scandal. His Majesty King Charles III has accepted the resignation, of course, the King being the defender of the faith in the United Kingdom, meaning he is the leader of the Church of England, so thus must accept the resignation of the Archbishop, who serves at the pleasure of the King. We'll keep you updated on the developments there in the United Kingdom. But for now, let's talk about what President-elect Trump is doing to fill out his cabinet. CBS News has learned that he plans to nominate South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem as Homeland Security Secretary and Florida Congressman Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. I want to bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang to talk more about this. So, Weijia, we were discussing this a little bit yesterday morning about who potentially would be seen as someone that Trump wants in his cabinet. And what we're already seeing now with some of these names that we're talking about is less Elaine Chao, less Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, Rex Tillerson, and more people who have been loyal, especially those who have been loyal on television for President-elect Trump.
Vlad, you're exactly right. When President Trump is looking at these posts, he's not necessarily looking at experience or somebody who can advise him and offer him guidance. It's all about a willingness to carry out his agenda, and that is very clear. This is how he wants to govern, and he has said as much, so no one should be surprised. But it's really interesting that you bring up the TV aspect, because he really values someone who can communicate, who can speak the language of Trump. And so when you look at all of these picks, all you have to do is look at their television performances, Vlad, whether it's, doing an interview, whether it's on the campaign during the RNC delivering a big speech. These are people who are well versed in how to deliver the message and how to make clear to the American people exactly what President-elect Trump's vision is. So you're right, that matters very much to him.
Yeah, I do sort of, when you look at the case of Marco Rubio and even Elise Stefanik and Lee Zeldin, for example, who's been picked to be the Environmental Protection Agency administrator, he has no experience at all in that role. But what I find really interesting about Marco Rubio is, of course, people forget that Marco Rubio coined the term "Never Trump," and Trump had that nickname for him during the 2015-2016 election cycle, Little Marco. And I'm told that the president-elect loves when people who were detractors come around to being extremely loyal, for lack of a better word, and that's why Marco Rubio is now up for this very important role. But Weijia, as you know, Marco Rubio is a hawk on so many issues, including China, including Iran, including what is happening in Ukraine, not for sending all that money to Ukraine. So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of a diplomatic mission he undertakes should he be confirmed.
And that's why, there are some people in the MAGA world who are questioning this choice. As you laid out, the foreign policy, the view on international relations doesn't exactly line up with Trump's completely isolationist view at sometimes all about America first. But there's some behind-the-scenes work going on there as well, because Trump recently named Susie Wiles as his incoming chief of staff. This is the woman who is essentially responsible for his campaign, for his successful campaign. And she is a Florida operative. She's very well known here and very close to Rubio. In fact, she was pushing him to be the vice presidential candidate. Well, this is pretty good. America's top diplomat, Vlad.
Yeah, indeed. Weijia Jiang, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you. Okay, an explosion rocks a New York neighborhood, leaving this home completely collapsed. We're going to have the details and the aftermath of the explosion next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. A jury has convicted the suspect accused of murdering 2 teenage girls in Indiana. Richard Allen now faces up to 130 years in prison for the 2017 killings of 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German. Prosecutors say he forced the girls off a trail in the small town of Delphi while they were hiking and murdered them. A New York judge will take another week to make a decision on President-elect Donald Trump's immunity case. It was supposed to come today, but it has now been delayed. A jury convicted Trump in May of falsifying business records to make a hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. Trump has denied wrongdoing. And take a look at this. Flames shooting out of a home in Rochester, New York after an explosion Monday morning. This video is from a neighbor's security camera. The home was leveled by the blast, but amazingly, the people inside managed to escape and were taken to a nearby hospital. The cause of the explosion remains under investigation. President Biden is set to meet with his Israeli counterpart Isaac Herzog in the White House today. Their meeting comes as aid groups in Gaza say Israel has failed to meet U.S. demands to allow greater humanitarian access into the enclave. Our Elizabeth Palmer has more from Tel Aviv.
On the face of it, Israel's president is in the U.S. for a speech to a Jewish group. Neither he nor the White House have said what's going to be on the agenda when Isaac Herzog meets with President Biden a little later today, but all eyes are on the issue of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Last month, the Secretary of State warned Israel that it needed to radically increase the supply of food into Gaza and also help civilians prepare for the coming winter. If not, he said, U.S. laws that prevent supplying offensive weapons to countries that block access to aid would kick in. In other words, American military assistance to Israel is at stake here, and the deadline is tomorrow. Aid supplies were sharply down in October to 30 trucks a day, which isn't nearly enough to provide the basics to more than 2 million people who are otherwise completely cut off from the world. Apparently, in response to U.S. pressure, Israel is increasing aid into Gaza. Just this morning, it announced that it was opening a new access point for trucks. But aid organizations say it's far too little and much too late. We hope to hear later today if or how the Biden administration is going to address this very contentious issue before its own deadline. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you very much. Our Nancy Cordes joins me now live from the White House to talk more about this meeting that the president is holding with the Israeli president later today. So, Nancy, you heard Liz's reporting there. Is that meant to be an agenda item as part of today's meeting?
Well, the White House hasn't shared much about what's going to be on the table for discussion, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that humanitarian aid will be a top topic today, because the administration, as Elizabeth pointed out, set out essentially an ultimatum nearly a month ago. They gave Israel a month to comply. That month ends tomorrow. And while the pace of humanitarian aid into Gaza has increased some since a low of about 30 trucks a day, it is not where the Biden administration wants it to be, which is 350 trucks a day. The question is, Vlad, if the White House and the president himself don't like the answers that they get from the Israeli president in this meeting here at the White House this morning, what exactly will the Biden administration do, and how much will Israel really care? First of all, the Biden administration has made sort of these vague threats to Israel before, and tends not to actually drop the hammer, at least not in a way that really hurts. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the Israeli government now knows that President Biden is a lame duck, and that if they don't like what he's doing or saying, they can simply wait him out for another 70 days or so, and then they've got a president here in the White House who they think will look much more favorably on their issues and their approach to this war.
So, Nancy, is it safe also then to assume that any prospect of any kind of concrete agreements with President Biden is probably not going to happen before the president-elect is sworn in?
Never say never, but it just appears that there are a lot of stumbling blocks. First of all, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been openly saying that he is speaking with Donald Trump now multiple times a day. So it's clear that he is looking beyond this White House at the next one. And then even before the election last week, the ceasefire talks that had been dragging on for months appeared to be really hitting a brick wall. You had Qatar, which is one of the central nations that have been working to broker some kind of ceasefire agreement with Egypt and Israel and leaders from Hamas. Basically, Qatar exited the discussions. They said, we don't think that Israel and Hamas are serious about trying to find some common ground here, and we're not going to re-engage until we think that they are. So even before Kamala Harris lost her bid for the White House last Tuesday, things were already looking pretty grim when it comes to this administration's ongoing efforts to broker some kind of peace deal in Israel.
All right, Nancy Cordes for us. Of course, Nancy, as you know, when that meeting happens, we'll have it live right here on CBS, and we'll have you on to talk about it. Thank you, Nancy.
You got it.
Okay, now turning to southern China, at least 35 people are dead and dozens more injured after a driver rammed a car into people exercising at an outdoor sports center. It happened Monday in the city of Zhuhai. The 62-year-old suspect was found in the car with a knife and self-harm injuries. Chinese police believe the attack was sparked by the suspect's dissatisfaction with his recent divorce settlement. We want to bring you an update on those wildfires raging on both coasts. In New Jersey, the Jennings Creek fire is growing despite some rain earlier yesterday morning. The fire has grown to around 3,500 acres. And there's a risk of more dangerous wildfire conditions today, with red flag warnings in effect from New York City to Boston. On the West Coast, the mountain fire in California has burned more than 20,000 acres. Firefighters there are working to contain the fire, which is now over 40% contained, but the area is expected to see some light to moderate winds, which could lead to further spread. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Vlad, it's no rest for the weary. Once again, like you said, portions of the Northeast gearing up for another day with concerns for fire danger. Meanwhile, Southern California, like you said, watching breezy conditions, maybe not quite as windy as it was last week, but still the concern for those winds picking up to kind of add some of that fuel to the flames, the proverbial speaking. All right, here's your red flag warnings. They're really from New York all the way up to Boston, including the entire state of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and a good part of New York. So gusty winds, 35 miles per hour, dry air moving in along with the cooler air that's moving in, and then just the dry fuels, all those dry grasses and bushes that are just ripe to burn. And then with those gusty winds, they could spread pretty quickly. Meanwhile, I got gusty winds back there in Southern California. Gusts potentially as high up to 50 miles per hour in the higher elevations. Lower elevations, we could still see some wind gusts 35 to 40 miles per hour as they blow in from the north and east there down into the valleys. Meanwhile, you've got another storm system approaching the Pacific Northwest. Several wind advisories in effect all the way up the coast as this next low pressure system approaches the coast. Now, places like Portland dealing with wind gusts around 20 miles per hour. We expect those wind gusts to increase as this next storm system and the associated atmospheric river brings in more of that Pacific moisture. This is round two. They kind of wrapped things up last night into this morning. Now round two is bringing, will be heavy rainfall along the coastal communities and then high elevation snow as the system really ramps up tonight into the day tomorrow before pushing out to the east and moving inland as we head through the second half of the week. But along the coast, places could see 2 to 3, maybe upwards of 5 inches of rain. And then up in the mountains, Vlad, once again, talking about maybe a half to up to a foot of snow in some places over the next couple of days. Back to you.
Wow, that's early. All right, Grant Gilmore for us. Thank you, Grant. Okay, a last-minute deal has been reached between Boeing and the family of a 737 crash victim. Details on the settlement coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, some big news out of the Supreme Court today as it releases its new order list for cases for the coming months. And with another Trump presidency on the horizon, there's, of course, keen interest in the issues that they're taking up and how the court might look like over the next couple of years. So let's bring in CBS News chief legal correspondent, Jan Crawford. She's here to discuss all of this for us. Jan, it's great to see you. So let's begin with that list. What are some of the big cases we're looking out for?
Well, Vlad, I got to tell you, today it's kind of like the day when you get in the blocks, you're ready for the big race, and then they just scratch it. Because there was nothing on that orders list. I mean, no real grants to speak of, nothing that big. So today was kind of a, let's wait and come back next week and see if they'll take something up. But just because there wasn't anything on the orders list today, Vlad, does not mean that the court is not a focus of attention, as you said. And really what everybody's talking about today in terms of the court is what is going on with the justices and which one of them may or may not be stepping down. So that's kind of what we've been focusing on today while we're waiting on another orders list maybe next week.
So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. We did have a chat last week, too, Jan. But what's sort of new is that you're actually seeing some people almost wishing for certain justices to step down. And, you know, you don't tell a Supreme Court justice to do anything that they don't want to do. And I found it kind of interesting that it's even some of those conservative SCOTUS watchers like Leonard Leo who are saying, hey, this is a little unseemly that people are pressuring Justice Thomas or Justice Alito to step down so that President-elect Trump can get another couple of conservative justices in there that are younger. What are you hearing from your sources?
Well, that's so true, Vlad. You know, and last week, of course, we were focused on whether or not Justice Alito and Justice Thomas might step down. I think, as I said last week, there's no question that Justice Alito is going to retire in the next 4 years. It's just a question of when. Thomas, you know, he's kind of stubborn, and we're not really sure about that. He'll make that decision. And, you know, you don't want to backfire. I mean, Justice Ginsburg didn't like it when people were telling her to step down. And look what happened. She stayed on. Many people, certainly if you're liberal, believe way too long. And as a result, a conservative replaced her who voted to overturn Roe versus Wade. So, you know, there's this fine line. And what we saw last week was the Democrats were starting to try to say, but Justice Sotomayor, you know, if you step down now, you're 70 and you're liberal. And so you could step down and President Biden could put your replacement on the bench, and then at least we would have that liberal seat there for another 30 or 40 years. Well, of course, Justice Sotomayor, who is only 70 years old, by far not anywhere near the oldest justice on the bench, kind of put the word out among people close to the court, and certainly I heard it she's not going anywhere. Let's just move on. That's ridiculous. So, it's a fine line on whether or not you want them to get off, but you don't want it to backfire. So Sotomayor is not going to retire. Justice Alito, I think that one is likely.
Yeah, I sort of feel, you know this better than I do, Jan, but I kind of think that Thomas also is probably going to, just like the last African-American justice on the bench, Thurgood Marshall, going to keep being on that bench until he can't anymore. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's going to be in the cards.
Well, Vlad, he did replace, that liberal icon, and, he was the second African-American. We've got Justice Jackson now. But, he's stubborn, and he doesn't really care what people say.
Yeah, I get that sense. Jan, always great to have you on to talk about this. Appreciate you as always, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Vlad.
Okay, a California woman will have to rebuild once again after her home burned down from wildfires in 2018. And now from the mountain fire. We'll bring you her story after the break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Boeing have reached a settlement with the family of a victim killed in a 2019 MAX 737 jetliner crash. The Ethiopian Airlines tragedy happened just minutes after takeoff and killed all 157 people on board. Details of the deal were not released and still have to be approved. The move allows Boeing to avert a federal civil trial that was to begin today. Relatives of more than 100 others have already settled wrongful death complaints with Boeing. A woman who survived the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California's history back in 2018 just saw her home get burned to the ground again, this time from the mountain fire. CBS News Los Angeles reporter Jasmine Veal has more on how she's determined to move forward even after so much loss.
My room is right here. You can actually see my bookcase.
There wasn't anything left to salvage in her parents' home on Old Coach Drive that Charlotte Edwards had just moved into a year ago.
Yeah, I felt like I was finally okay since the last fire. I was like, okay, I finally got, settled back in. I'm finally back home with my family.
Unbelievably, Edwards has been through this nightmare before. 6 years ago, the day before her birthday, on November 8th, the deadly and destructive campfire destroyed her home and wiped out the Northern California town of Paradise as she ran from the flames.
The second we got in the car was a one-way out of that place. So we were stuck in traffic for bumper to bumper for like an hour, watching as the sky just got blacker and blacker.
Then last week, the day before her birthday again, the mountain fire came raging through her Camarillo neighborhood.
Yeah, so I've been through this before, and I just looked at everything that I had, and I was like, this is all a replacement from the last fire.
She left with her parents with only the clothes on her back and her 3 cats.
All of a sudden, Charlotte jumps up and says, I've been through this before, I'm packing up now. And 2 minutes after that, the smoke started coming through.
Like so many had to do, her stepdad, Charlie O'Dell, says they left with very little.
It breaks my heart for her. She's a very resilient, strong kid, but when you face this kind of devastation, you wonder you just wonder why me?
But Edwards says she is grateful that they are together and they're all okay. Even after experiencing all of this loss from both of these devastating wildfires, Charlotte says she does want her family to come back here and rebuild. That Ventura County is her home. They do have fire insurance, so they say they hope to be living here again in the next 2 years. In Camarillo, Jasmine Veal, KCAL News.
All right, let's bring back CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the final look at the national forecast. Grant.
Vlad, and up the coast to the north, another storm system is going to be slamming into the Pacific Northwest as we go through the second half of the day today into the day tomorrow. Coastal rain, high elevation snow, that goes through the day on Wednesday. It starts to let up a little bit into Thursday. Meanwhile, the southern half of the country enjoying relatively warm and pleasant conditions, temperatures in the 80s in places like Houston, Miami, nice and warm with temperatures near 86. In the Northeast, breezy, dry, and cooler weather moving in. That's going to increase the threat for fire danger through the day today. Farther to the north, relatively mild conditions up into the northern tier states. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. That does it for me, folks. But stay right where you are. After the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.